Hi, welcome back to the channel. We are going to get on with some painting tutorials now. We're going to have a look at what it means to actually be battle ready, and we are going to use these push fit Infernus Marines that you can get. You pick them up in your local toy store. You can probably pick some up still in your local Warhammer store. They were the kind of freebie giveaway model of the month right back at the beginning of 10th edition, I think, as I recall, or somewhere around there. Anyway, they must have made millions of them because there's loads of them around, so you can pick them up and they're free. So we can use them as our paint mules, like something that we can use to test a scheme on before we put paint all over our very expensive models that we've bought. Okay, so we've got one made up here, I've got one on the sprue here, and we're going to start right at the very beginning with with the absolute most basic scheme in terms of getting paint on to make it battle ready to go in a game, what might be accepted or the accepted notion of what battle ready is, and we'll get into that shortly. I did say I would give a few tips on building as well. I'm not going to build the models on video, as I said, because I find that personally I find it a little bit boring to watch, but hey, there's plenty of guys out there doing it if you want to watch people build models. But I would give you a few tips, again, from an amateur perspective, the things that I learned along the way, mistakes I made, and I would say mistake number one is using too much glue. Everybody uses too much glue, and it risks running onto your thumbs and fingers, and then you're going to burn your thumbprint or fingerprint into your model, and that's really a pain to try and get rid of because you've got to wait for it to dry, you've got to sand it down, and it never quite looks as it did when it was that nice shiny panel that you had at the front end. And it may be one of those things that's going to happen from time to time, then you've got to deal with it. But if you can get your glue right from the get-go, then that's going to pay big dividends in the long run. I always have 3 different types to hand. Brand doesn't really matter, it's the principle that matters in this sense. I use a thin glue, it's plastic cement, so it's going to melt the plastic surfaces together permanently and then bond them. And this ultra thin, you can just touch it at one end, very small dot, and it will run along using what they call capillary action. So it kind of gets pulled along the join and will make a lovely seal. However, because it's very runny, you need to be really careful when you're using it that it doesn't run out and crack into your fingers, etc., or elsewhere on the model. Same in the middle here, but fast drying, because there might be something that you've got that's awkward to hold. You've got an awkward angle, you can just touch it in there, glue it very quickly, put it to one side. And then for bigger joins, or where you've got a little bit more time, a standard kind of glue, which is like a more gel consistency that you can usually brush on, and you've got a bit of time to fiddle around with the join and get it exactly where you want it. So having those 3 different types of glue for me makes a really big difference. And then there may be occasions where you're not gluing plastic, you're having to glue resin, or you're having to glue other things onto your model later on, for example, or you're doing some kind of kit bashing where you want to bring in different materials, and then you need some kind of super glue. I use a gel kind of super glue for that particular job, because you can dot it onto something else like a little cardboard piece, and then use a toothpick or a pin or something, or whatever you need for the precise amount of glue you want to go, and then put the surfaces together. I do also have a runny super glue as well, which is great for basing material, things where you need to kind of spread the super glue quite quickly onto a larger area and let it dry. So it's horses for courses when it comes to glue, but the reality is you are probably going to need more than one type. However, to start with, if you had to pick one, I would go with the thin cement, because generally you're going to be working on smaller models, and then just touching these things, just touching the little joins where the plastic meets is going to glue them really nice and quick. However, we didn't need to worry about these because these guys are push fit anyway, but you get my point. The only other 2 things I was going to mention about building were having a good quality pair of snippers, plastic cutters, because you don't want to risk pulling the plastic or stretching the plastic where it meets the sprue when you cut it off, because that can cause damage to your model, and that's going to show up quite clearly on your end product. Similarly, having a nice sharp hobby knife to allow you to kind of remove the little nibs of plastic you've left after you've cut it off the sprue, or removing mold lines, where the plastic model has been made in the compression. We'll have little lines where the two molds were pushed together. Having those removed from your model is quite important, because you might start looking at using techniques like dry brushing, very popular, and if you do that over your mold lines, they're going to stand out even more, so you want to try and get rid of as many of those as you can. Those are my only tips for building models, I think, really. Otherwise, follow the instructions, be careful with the glue, have fun, get the model looking like how you want. Now, we're going to focus on getting these guys battle ready, and what does it mean? So we'll see you shortly.
Okay, battle ready. Level 1, we've got our Marine ready to go. He is basically going to be an ultramarine, so he's going to be mainly in this blue colour. So it makes sense really just to prime him blue and then paint in the other colours that we need. And battle ready level 1, I would say, we're going to start right at the beginning, it's just going to be a minimum of 3 colours with a painted base, and this has already got some rocks moulded into it, so we don't need to put any texture, and a finished rim. And between those 3 elements, for me, that is battle ready level 1. And on this Marine, it's going to mean he's mainly blue. We're going to have black in his under garment, I suppose. He's got his undersuit that goes underneath his armor. There's going to need to be some leather on the pouches. There's going to need to be some metallic gunmetal, or kind of metallic aluminium or steel or something on of these pieces, and on his weapon. And then there is going to need to be some gold, because he's going to be like a standard ultramarine. Gold trim, gold on his aquila, some colour in his eyes, red eyes, and then some kind of metallic kind of covering on his flamer. Rock colours on the bottom, black rim on the base, and then we will have had more than 3 colours and more than the base, right? So we would say that is kind of battle ready level 1. So I'm going to start with the black, because that's the easiest thing to do. If we make a mistake, we can go back over it with some blue. I just used a spray can of Colourforge's Republic Blue to get him primed, but you can use Games Workshop's Macragge Blue or any other blue. You can of course just paint in blue, but the reason I like the spray can is you get that nice smooth finish if you're not too greedy with the spray, making sure you've kind of got him coloured. So he's ready to go, right? And he's not going to take long to get him into battle ready state. So let's go. We're going to do the black first. I'm going to use a Baden black, but any black paint will do. This is a nice base paint from Citadel. I need to give it a bit of a shake. Oh, a brand new pot as well, that's nice. Forgot I had that. Now I am using a wet palette. I'm again not going to go into that. They are relatively cheap to buy on anywhere where you buy your things, particularly online, and they come with the liner papers and the sponge. There's also loads of videos out there about how to make your own, but what I'm doing here is just putting a little bit on my wet palette, and I've added a little dash of water from my brush in the paint pot just to kind of keep it nice and smooth. So should be able to go on nice and easy. I'm going to make sure I've not got too much paint on my brush, draw it off on the wet palette, and then we're just going to go in and paint those black sections in. And the more brush control we have when we do this thing, the better, because the less mistakes we're going to have to fix later on. But like I say, if we do go over a little bit onto the blue, not the end of the world, because we can go back in later on with Macragge Blue and just tighten it up a little bit. Okay, so go around the model, make sure you get all the blue done. His undersuit here, we've got a little bit under here, just where his leg plates meet the body armor, I suppose. So we want to get those done. and work your way around the model until you're happy you have got all the black bits done. Okay, we've got our blacks done. We've put some in between his legs in this undercoat here. We have got some on these kind of rubber grips on his Infernus rifle, its flamer. I've put some black in the holes on the main kind of body of the gun as well, because otherwise those would be blue under the metallic, and I think it's probably better to paint them in now. What you can do is dot it in and then just rub the paint off like that to kind of keep the blue, so get the black in the holes and then just rub. Put some little black on his little rubber hose here on his helmet, some little black on these clasps on his little pot of goo that he's going to fire into his guns, the flammable stuff. Name escapes me right now. And these little straps at the back, I suppose, and his undersuit really underneath there. That's all I think I needed to do on this guy. Next up, we're going to do brown. I'm just going to use some Mournfang brown, and the reason is it's a relatively light brown, and so it's going to show up against the blue. If we use a darker brown, which we might do like on a different level, because then we can use a lighter brown to kind of scratch and score the leather, if you like, and make it look a little bit leather-like. But if we've just got small areas like that on a small model, you want to go for high contrast so that people can see that you've painted it. So we've got the black and the blue. There's not a huge amount of contrast in those, but it's noticeable division between the panels of the armor. And then his little pouches here and things are going to be in the Mournfang brown. So let's get that done next. Okay, so we very quickly did his pouches and his leather belt there, and you can see that's quite a nice contrast there, very obvious. Obviously a different color to the blue around, and it would be easy to spot from a reasonable distance away that you'd done some painting. Now, theoretically, those are three colors and would be accepted as tabletop standard, right? But obviously we're missing key things on this model, so we're going to keep going. And I think we are ready really to go into the metallics once we have done his eyes. Now, we're going to need a smaller brush from that, and this is where our brush control comes into play. We're going to have to really be nice and precise when we get the red in there. But again, if some gets on the surrounding area, just wipe it off very quickly with your thumb, and you can touch up with Macragge blue around the eye just to kind of make sure it's in there, okay? While I'm on the topic, while I was doing the brown, I don't know if you can see just in here, I managed to get some on this, one of his little vents on his power pack, and get some brown just on the side there where my brush kind of flicked over. But I don't need to worry about that too much because I'm going to paint those in a metallic color, so I can just paint over the brown. So we don't always need to go back and fix mistakes if we find that actually they're on something we're going to paint later anyway. It's harder if you get metallic back on the prime colors because they're harder to cover over, being metallic paints. So we need to take a little bit more careful when we get to that stage. But for now, let's just try and get a nice small brush, nice and gently, and get those red eyes done for him. Got my smaller brush, and we're going to do it in a nice bright red. I'm using Evil Sun Scarlet here, but any nice bright red will do, or even an orange if you want. Again, remember what we're trying to do is create contrast, and it's a very small area, this eye. So we need to make it as bright as we can, and there are methods we can do in other levels to enhance the eye beyond the base red or the base color, red, orange, whatever we're going to put on there. But to start with, we're just going to do the red. So let's get that mixed up. I'm just going to take a little bit of red out of my pot, pop it on my wet palette, tiny little bit of water in there, mix it, wipe my brush off, wipe the excess off, go back to the paint on the wet palette, make sure I've got a tiny amount of paint on the end of the brush because we don't want to blob it in his eye, and then I'm going to gently kind of get it in there. So let's see what happens. Okay. A tiny amount of paint on my brush now. Let's see if we get in and get this eye done nice and close in there. And there's like a nice raised bit where he's got his eye. I'm just going to come from the back edge and try and get it nicely into the shape. You've got to turn the model round. That's always a nice thing. You're trying to drag the paint away from the edges and just fill up that nice shape. too far over the edges. Remember, we can, if we need to, fix that with some acrylic blue later on. And so the one eye done there. Let's get in and get the next one done. Again, tilt the model over. Get into the side. And just drag it along the shape. Might need to flip him over this way just to get in the front corner of his eye. So, key here is make sure you've got enough paint on the brush, but not so much that you flood that eye socket. And hopefully you can see we're getting him nicely filled up in the eye sockets. Okay, so he's done the red there, that's good. I think we are good to go on the metallics. All right, so now you want to make sure you've changed brushes. Try and separate your brushes between the ones that you use for metallic paints and the one you use for base paints, because you don't want metallic flakes in your base paints because they will come through. If you can't do that and you have to use the same brush, really make sure you wash it really well. Kind of drag your nails through the top of the brush as well to squeeze out any of the flakes. Keep washing it until you're 100% sure that it is clean. And then we can just go in. Again, we got the lead belcher with a little bit of water, and we can go in and start doing our metallics. So I'm going to do the whole of the body of this weapon here in this color. I might do his Prometheum tank, I remembered the word, in a different color. And then we've got his vents on the back of the pack here. And I think that might be it. But let's see how we go. Let's start with the weapon, and we'll work on from there. Right, he's got a little cylinder at the top there, this part. Might do that in a different color, I think. Different metallic. Now, it's very easy to overdo the metallic, so just make sure you're getting enough there. And that's my brush control, already got some on the black, and it's very clear when it goes over, so we're gonna have to touch that up. These things happen, okay? We don't want to stress too much. Some of us will have better brush control than others. We want to try and make sure we cover up all this blue and gradually work our way around the weapon and all the other bits. Guard, trigger guard there as well, this bit that connects on where the Prometheum tank kind of plugs into his gun. That's got to be done all the way into there. And work our way around the model, picking out any of the bits we want to be, the lead belcher. Now you notice I don't use a stand, like to clip it to, and that is a risk because sometimes it can fall out of your hands, but I prefer this because I'm always kind of spinning the model and turning it in different directions. I just find it a little bit easier to hold on to the base like this and get it done. So let's work our way around all of these metallics and see what it's done, what it looks like when we get all the lead belcher done. Okay, 2 layers of lead belcher there on the parts that I wanted to do. So we've got the vents on the backpack and the little vents down the bottom, the main body of the weapon and the little nozzle at the end there, plus his little side ear pieces that are on the side of his helmet as well. So that gives a nice bit of contrast. Now I'm going to use Balthasar gold, and you could use like maybe a bronze or a brassy type gold or something like that to do the main encasement of the flamer unit at the front. Now remember, we put the black in, and we need to be careful that we don't put the brass or the gold in over the top. So what I like to do is kind of over brush it, if you like, by just starting at one end and pulling the brush along without going backwards and forwards, and not vertical, so that I don't get the bristles into the holes. And hopefully that way I can avoid getting paint into the actual encasement of the gun. And I just pull it over the top like this, nice and gently. It's going to take more than 2 coats, but already hopefully you can see that I can get the metal onto the top of the weapon without hitting the black spots that we put into the holes on the encasement. I'm sure this has a special name, doesn't it? This case over the top of the flamer. Maybe you can let me know what it is, but anyway, we will carry on. There's a little bit goes around the corner at the front end of the weapon there as well. Got to be careful we don't go over the lead belcher that we've already done. And then on the other side, we're going to do the same kind of over brushing by just making sure we pull the paint in one direction. Like so. And that looks quite nice. So we're just completing that. And I think also what I'm going to do is I am going to do this cylinder at the top and also the Promethium tank. Now there's a support cable that goes around the bottom of the Promethium tank, and I've left that blue at the moment. I am going to do that lead belcher, but because it's so thin, it makes sense to do the Balthasar gold first and then overpaint the lead belcher around the strap. And then we've got a nice skull and crossbones kind of configuration on the side, which we'll do in the main gold that we're going to do his Aquila and his trim in. So we'll get that done and come back in a moment. Okay, we've got the first gold down there on the barrel, the main kind of barrel or encasement of the weapon, and the cylinder and his Promethium tank. And don't forget obviously to do the inside. It's a good point really, is like how far in do we need to paint with the bits that can't be seen, and I suppose that answers its own question. If there's something that can't be seen or isn't going to be seen regularly, like the guy is this way, people looking down, we don't really need to stuff our brush in there and risk painting things that we don't, getting paint on areas that we don't need to. And that's something we might look at in the future as well. Something we will look at in the future is what we call sub-assemblies. So painting, making things easier for ourselves by painting smaller parts of the model before we put them onto the model itself, so that we can make sure we can access all the areas that need painting. Okay, so I think we've got a little bit of touching up to do. I got a little bit of my gold onto the black, and there's a little bit of the Macranc blue that needs tidying up, etc. But we're going to do that right at the end. And now we are going to carry on with the gold, and we're going to get a nice bright gold, probably the Retributor armor gold from Citadel on his Aquila, on the trim, on the little skull, on the Promethium tank. You probably need to have a good look around the model. These basic guys don't have a huge amount of embellishment, but some guys in the ranks, obviously the more senior members, veterans and things, will have, Aquilas and things, maybe sometimes on their knees or on their arms close to the weapons, or they might have something on the weapon itself. So you need to have a look. Maybe they've got something on the back of the power pack. Have a look around, pick everything out, and then get that done in a nice brighter gold, I suppose. And Retributor armor we're going to use is the classic kind of Space Marine gold. So we'll get that done exactly the same. We're going to do it nice and thin coat, 2 coats, nice and smooth. And then we will come back and have a look at it when we've done that. So there we go. We've got a couple of layers of the gold on, and just his trim and his Aquila. We've got some on the Promethium tank just at the front here. And now what we need to do is focus on getting these stones on the base done. Now, there's a few things on here. There's some stones and some gravel and like little bits of pole coming out of some of the rocks, I suppose, like broken building parts and some like plant or organic matter. So we're gonna have a bit of fun with that as well, building them up to different colors. But what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna paint the whole thing in Carrick stone, a couple of coats of that, and then I'm gonna pick out or use a shade paint to kind of go into the cracks to kind of stain that a slightly different color, pick out the little detail bits, and that should suffice. So let's get the Karak stone down. We're going to need a couple of coats to kind of get over the top of this blue here. So let's get that done, and we'll see where we go. Okay, we've got the Karak stone down now. Basically going to apply just like an earth shade in the cracks, so we can just kind of discolor that a little bit. And of course, the best thing to use for that is their own Citadel Colors Agrax Earthshade, because obviously that's really what it's designed for. So we're going to use a little bit of this, get some on our brush straight out of the pot. Right, so we're just going to try and lay into those gaps as best we can. Just like so, and you can see it starts to run around the gaps a little bit for us, which is exactly what we're looking for, just to kind of give some colour. Again, we're looking for contrast right in and around the stones. We don't need a huge amount, it's just to give a little bit more interest to the base more than anything else. There we go. Okay. Gonna let that dry. Okay, while we're waiting for that to dry, one of the final touches I think for level 1 is just making sure we've got in some insignia markings, I suppose, on the model. And we're going to choose to have just the classic ultramarine symbol on his left shoulder, and then he's part of a fire support squad, being that he's got a flamer, so we're going to put one of these on his right hand pauldron, his shoulder armor, if you like. And that's probably it for level 1. You just need that kind of basic insignia, really kind of makes it a little bit like when you put the gold on, it just gives it that extra layer of something fun. You know, you could add some of these smaller symbols, I guess, you know, somewhere on him, maybe on his knee or something like that, but you know, whatever you want really. But bare minimum, you know, you want him as an ultramarine, and you want him in his correct squad. In this case, Infernus Marines are part of the fire support, so I'm going to cut those out and get them ready, in just individual ones of those ready to go. These are water slide transfers, so they just go in water for a little while and then slide off onto the model. So I'm going to cut those out while we're waiting for that shade paint to dry on the base. Alright, let's get these decals soaking. So we just got the little ultramarine symbol there. We're just going to drop it in the water. Let it soak for a little while. Another little tip as well is when you cut it off, make sure, like if that's the section that you cut it off from, that you don't add that into the water, because this will also come off on the transfer sheet, you know, and you'll get these black lines and these letters floating around in the water. And then when you come to take out the decal, you're fiddling around trying to separate the main decal from the other bits that you didn't plan on putting on your model, and it all gets a little bit fiddly, and it's fiddly enough as it is, right? So these don't take very long. Once you get them out like this, I like to just dab them on just get the excess water. If you just touch it to a little bit of paper like that, and then you should find that it starts to slide to the edge of the paper. And now I can offer it up to the model like so, and I can just kind of slide it off onto his pauldron, and then use some tweezers or just a sharp edge while it's still wet. You can just maneuver it into place. These aren't great, these, I think they call them Ultima symbols, aren't they? Because obviously you're placing it on a curved surface, and so the natural tendency is for the top section to kind of dry a little bit closer than you would have if it was on a flat surface. But try and get it as nice as you can with a little bit of a gap at the top, somewhere central on the pauldron, but not too crazy. And again, next level on these would be to use some solvents to help soften that, but we're just doing level 1 at the moment. We just want to get the decal on and in place, let it dry, and then we'll see how it goes. Okay, so we're going to do the same with the fire support and get that on this right hand side as well, and then we'll come back and have a look at the final stage. Alright, so our base has dried more or less, the earth shade's just kind of tucked in there. We've got our symbols on our pauldrons, and he is, I would say, almost ready to go. Last thing we've got to do is get some colour on the rim here, and then for me that is a level 1 battle ready Space Marine. Okay, now there is a lot we can do to take him up to level 2, and level 2 I would think I would best describe as where we are highlighting some more of the detail. I've kind of done, for example, he's got his little wrist communicator. You can do red and green dots on there to highlight those, which I've done now as part of his level 1 just because I was waiting for it to dry. But there's so much more detail on these weapons, you know, in terms of the context that you've got on the Aquila, you know, these little indentations in the vents on the power pack. There's all sorts of things we can do, and also to shade, other than just shading them in, we'll be looking to kind of highlight certain areas as well. So the shading and the highlighting, I think, is what takes your model to that kind of level 2 battle ready standard. I haven't really worked out how many levels there are, but we know, like say the top level is, you know, God tier, Golden Demon winning painting, and level 1, I would say it probably doesn't get more basic than this. This is your level 1 guy. He's got the minimum amount of paints on him required to make him look like a painted Space Marine. He's got his red eyes, there's some silver on there, there's some gold, he's mainly blue, we've done his black undercoat, we've got a painted base with a little bit of contrast on it, and now we're just going to finalise this black rim. So we're going to go back to our Abaddon black, and we can just use that to double coat this rim very carefully because we don't want it to get too much onto the top here. And what I like to do is I like to put the paint on, and then I will get another piece of kitchen roll, just bring that in double folded like this, and then once I've painted him, I can put him down on the paper towel and just give him a twist so that he doesn't have any paint on the underside here, because when I put him down to dry, I don't want him to stick to the table. Okay, so we need to make sure we wipe him off on the towel, wait for it to dry, put another coat on, and then we'll have a look at the final product for our guy, the level 1 battle ready Space Marine.